So the beauty of Flutter is it lets you build an application that runs across multiple platforms and multiple geometries, even more than most of the standard platforms. And what comes with that? A huge testing burden, right? And so the question is, what kind of low effort testing can we do that will give us some reasonable comfort that the layouts are working across various geometries and sizes? And it turns out that Flutter comes with this thing called golden testing, or golden tests, golden images. And basically what you do is you take an image, you do a layout, you take a picture of the image, you store that, and later on, every time you make a change, you rerun that same test that does the same layout, and it compares that image against the golden image, right? So it turns out I played with this, and I was like, man, I got this phone. It's like 1080p by 2000. I'll just make a canvas for that and run a test, and then I'll know whether it's going to work for that phone. And it turned out that was totally stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't understand how mobile devices, because I'd just been playing with the web app or working on a web app. So it turns out that the mobile devices actually have an effective scale down resolution that is smaller than the screen resolution, right? And that way you get kind of a constant look and feel. They figure out what the DPI is for that thing, and then they size it accordingly so that you get the right text, and that extra DPI gives you finer fonts and all that. But logically sizing stuff is some power of that actual physical ratio. So my test just didn't work, right? It turns out that the Flutter size is actually the width of the height of the device you're working on, which is the width and the height you want to practice the layout in and you want to do the golden test in, is actually the physical size divided by the device pixel ratio. So on the web app, it turns out that the device pixel ratio is 1, and that's why you can do an 800 by 600 and you get a good looking browser window, or you can do a in my case, I did a 500 by 430 because the Chrome by default, unless you size it, won't go less than 500, right? You actually have to override the default for Chrome to make that work. But, the point is, if you're going to do a web app, it's basically got a DPR, device pixel ratio, of 1:1. So that means you just size the canvas to the size you want the web to do, and you're good to go. But if you got a pixel that's 1080p by 2000, right? And they usually list it the other way, but I tend to think most people our apps are built for people to use them vertically. So it's 1080p wide, 1080 wide, and 2200 long. But when you go and create a canvas for that and build a test bed, it doesn't work. And the reality is, it turns out you can use MediaQuery and find out that the actual resolution for Flutter is 392 by 783. The rest of that resolution is done doing fine, making it look good, all of that, but the effective layout resolution is 392 by 783. So if you were saying, hey, I want to do a different layout, whether this thing's wider than 400, then on a Pixel 3a, even though it's got a 1080p screen, the effective width would be 392, and so therefore your breakpoint at 400 wouldn't actually happen, right? Like if you said bigger than 400 and smaller than 400, it would actually give you the smaller than 400. And on phones, a lot of times, like you'll make a field to full width. You won't make it sized correctly because, anyway, yeah, there's just a bunch of things layout-wise you might do on a phone that are different, especially if you got like a finger, right? So that's going to run it. So the end result, though, is it turns out if we're going to test, what we need to do is understand what the DPR is, what the MediaQuery returned width and height is for all the devices. And I'm sure there's a table somewhere for this. I don't know what it looks like. So instead, like any good coder, I went and wrote a app that goes and calculates. That goes and you just run it on any of the emulators, and you probably don't test against all of them, but you got half a dozen or whatever. Basically, what I did is I wrote this little program, and all it does is a MediaQuery and prints it out. And so this is actually for the Pixel 3a here, right? Physical resolution, 1080 by 2220. And it has a DPR of 2.75. So basically you divide 1080 by 2.75 and 2220 by 2.75, and you get an effective size of 392 by 783. So if you're going to do a golden test, you're going to do a golden test at 392 by 783. It won't be perfect because it won't be the Android renderer running unless you can actually run it in that. But if you're going to end up just running it on like your build server or something and see if you get an obvious layout problem, then this is the size you would pick. And you would do the same thing for your Pixel 6a, your Samsung, whatever, and your iOS devices, right? And that way you also build up a library or a knowledge base of, hey, if we're going to do breakpoints, which of these are going to end up on which side of these breakpoints? Which ones are going to end up on these different behaviors? Basically, you build up this pool of effective sizes, and that gives you an idea what your test sizes should look like, and it gives you an idea what your breakpoints should be. So the only other piece here, I think, is this is actually the one for a browser that's actually sized at 500 by 782. And it's a 1-to-1 DPR. So it turns out the window size and the code size, the window and the canvas size, as seen by Flutter, is actually going to be identical, right? Because the DPR is the same. So how did I do this? You can just copy and paste this code. I actually think this is probably useful, and I'm gonna ask that we put it in our test bed at work. So all I did was create a stateless widget in the screen, and we just go out and we get the media player for the context, MediaQuery for the context, and we just build a list of those. And I just built a scroll view and put a list view with a bunch of list tiles in it and did little borders around them. And that's how we end up with something that looks like this. And it should run on any platform. And you should be able to pull up all of the MediaQuery information from it. I'm sure there's something already out there for this. It just, I did not understand this. I blew like an afternoon on testing. And I couldn't figure out what to do with the canvas sizes. I kind of faked it. But now I know how it works because it works with this MediaQuery. So I hope that's useful for you. And this MediaQuery piece explains how the effective size should be, how the size should be set for your test bed, and also how you can build a library of breakpoint sizes, behavior breakpoint sizes, and then basically just copy and paste this into a project and run it, man. Hope that's useful. Have a great day.